Hi, everybody. Welcome to Frugal Tech Live. In the snowy day in Decatur, Indiana, we are recording episode number 305 with David Hoff of Cloudsherpas. They are the leader in managed Google Apps solutions. We're going to have a great show for you today, so don't go away. We'll be right back with today's installment of Frugal Tech Live. Hey everybody, and thank you so much for coming by. And I always like to give a shout out to the sponsors of our show, GFI Software. And I want to talk to you just briefly about one of their newest products. They recently acquired Sunbelt Software and have now offer what's called GFI Viper Enterprise Antivirus Software. And this is an awesome product, folks. But did you know you can get up to 50% off competitive upgrades? So if you own something, from Symantec and other business level antivirus products, that by moving to Viper Enterprise, you can take 50% off, and you can get a free 30-day evaluation version of it by simply going to our website, frugalbrothers.com, clicking Solutions, and then Antivirus. You can download a full working evaluation copy. Check it out for your business today. Save yourself a lot of money and grief with the best-in-class GFI Viper Enterprise Antivirus. Also like to thank our good friends at Telestream as a supporter of our show and what we do here as a sponsor. You'll soon see some material from them on our website and in the course of this show. And we ask everybody, if you're watching us on Justin.tv, come on over to live.frugalbrothers.com. That's where the chat room we moderate is located. And you can follow us on, and we ask that you follow us on Justin TV as well to show your support for what we do here at Frugal Tech Live. And you can follow us on Twitter at Frugal Tech on Twitter. As promised, we've got a great guest with us today. We have Mr. David Hoff. He is the co-founder of Cloudsherpas. They're in the business of managing and migrating companies and governments to Google Apps. Very large enterprises, that sort of thing. And David Hoff is responsible for advancing the technology vision, of Cloudsherpas and also their new customers. David brings 10 plus years of IT management experience to Cloudsherpas, specifically in the areas of messaging and collaboration, custom application development, and mobile solution development. So we want to bring on David onto the show. We're bringing him on. Hey, David, thank you so much from a snowy Atlanta, Georgia today, right?
Good afternoon, yeah.
And
Winter
so
Wonderland here.
You're a lot safer at home than you are behind the wheel of your car, I would imagine, today.
Absolutely.
David, to get started, why don't you tell me a little bit about your background let's talk a little bit about the background of Cloudsherpas and then a little bit about yourself as well.
Absolutely. I'll probably mix both of them together. But Cloudsherpas was started by three of us, myself and two others, almost 3 years ago. And we're probably best described as a pure-play Google system integrator. We all came from the world of enterprise computing, and my background specifically was in the IBM stack, so having done a lot of Lotus Notes, email and messaging and collaboration projects for medium and large enterprise customers. All of us had kind of seen the writing on the wall that there was an opportunity for people to dramatically cut costs and kind of move to utility-based computing, especially for email. We saw a big opportunity there, and Google really seemed to be the leader in being able to provide that. I think initially the product was called Google Apps for Your Domain, and we saw that as something. It was the first real service that was offering multi-tenant products using your own custom domain name.
Okay.
we got in touch with Google and became one of their enterprise partners, and took a little while to get the message across to some of the enterprises. But I would say within 6 months we had our first few customers, started to get them migrated, and ever since then it's just been exponential growth. We're going up on our third year, and we'll be probably 40 employees here shortly. So the market has taken to it, and I think the timing with everyone, the economy being the way it is, everyone's been focused on cost, and that's probably one of our strongest suits. So a lot of background there, but hopefully that addresses your question.
Well, it does, and certainly with the economy the way it has been, hopefully things are improving. But companies have been looking at those licensing fees that they've been getting. Companies like Microsoft's been getting for Exchange Server and SharePoint and these things, and they're really taking a second look and looking at the cloud. So I think one of the questions is, and as I understand it, David, Cloudsherpas does, because of the size of your organization and the size of organizations you work with, you actually do some work directly with Google. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got kind of three core legs to the business, if you will. We've got a group that is focused on the management of Google Apps. So essentially, customers purchase Google Apps from Cloudsherpas, and we help them manage the environment. We have a professional services group that does migrations, and then we do a lot of custom application development around Google Apps, integrating it with other applications and doing application development on Google's platform, which is known as Google App Engine. But we work very closely with Google in all respects in each of those three areas.
Okay. And I'm sorry, folks, we're getting a little bit of buzz in the audio, and that could be a Skype issue or something like this. Not too bad, but I apologize if the audio quality, we're getting a little bit of buzz. David, that being the case, since you work, you're working with Google, particularly in areas like app development and that kind of thing, do you actually have conversations with them where that might go, well, we're thinking of maybe adding this capability to the suite, or we're looking for feedback on this particular product. What can you give us a hand with that? Does that sort of thing happen with your company?
Yeah, absolutely. We, and by working in some of the largest accounts, those customers definitely have a different level of access to the internal workings of Google. And as part of that process, we facilitate a lot of those discussions. Google's a very interesting company in that regard.
Yes, it is.
They're very engineering focused, so a lot of their feature requests and how they try and determine where to focus resources developmentally is driven by data and by usage. So it's less from we want this, we need this,
right?
And it's more metric driven from seeing that people use things like offline or they don't.
Right.
They look at those statistics to determine, is that something we should invest more time in, and that's why you see, they see a big uptick in the usage of things like Google Docs, and so you see lots of enhancements there. Mm-hmm. Very focused around what people are actually consuming and getting value out of, and it's a very public company in that way. A lot of the forums are the primary areas that Google uses to discuss and talk about new features. So it's not uncommon to see, in the case of something like a Google Sites, the forum being one of the primary avenues for feature requests being submitted. They're relatively transparent
now,
in that process.
Is this forum a place where anybody can visit, or do you have to be a Google partner to participate in those forums?
No, that's kind of the interesting thing, because most of the products that you see in Google Apps are also consumer products. If you take Gmail,
right.
A lot of the features that you get are part of the Premier Edition, but it's also a consumer product, and there's just as much weight coming from that consumer route. And so the forums that you go to are all public forums. There's nothing that that we have special access to, saying that our input is more valuable than anyone else's. It's driven through that public forum, and there's usually one for each product. So
really,
Gmail has its own forum, sites, docs, etc.
Okay. So just if you can, and you've answered some of this already, but if you could just give us a little bit more of the overview of the working relationship between you and Google, that would be great.
Absolutely. So we're one of the top Google Apps resellers, and really what that means is we sell Google Apps to customers, to end users, at the same exact price point as you would get if you purchased it direct from Google.
Okay.
We have several add-ons and value adds that are a part of our license fee that you get over and above a purchase direct through Google. So these include things like Sherpa Tools, which is our administrative suite that allows you to automate and manage Google Apps in your domain. So, setting custom policies for how your users' default settings are configured. If you wanted to set a standard signature, these are all things that you can do with our product Sherpa Tools, and that's included if you're a Cloudsherpas customer. We also do things like quarterly webinars. We call them Keeping Up in the Cloud.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of an aggregate of all the new features that have been released into the apps platform. We summarize them and kind of identify the top ones and give you some use case information on, perhaps how you might want to use delegated mail, how you might want to use the two-factor authentications, things that, because Google has so many releases, we help identify the ones that are important and might have an impact on your business.
Okay. Can you kind of tell our audience, and maybe give us an overview of why a company, or I assume that you're working with some government as well, or looking at that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So why would they choose Cloudsherpas in a Google Apps migration rather than doing it themselves?
Well, and the first thing to keep in mind is that an apps migration is never that difficult. All the documentation is out there.
Mm-hmm.
What we find is a lot of organizations don't have a very tight handle on their current messaging environment.
Amen. Amen.
And and that can be sometimes the hardest part, is you don't know exactly all the things you have. You don't know what alias emails. You don't know what public folders. Or you may just have resource limitations. You may have a group of IT people that are a lot of times already stretched pretty thin, and you need someone to come in that has a specific methodology on how we're going to identify, what you have and how that transforms to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably our biggest value proposition. We do these things day in, day out, and when an organization wants to, perhaps synchronize an on-premise directory with Google, we do several of those a day. So we're very comfortable with the tooling to do that.
Okay.
And it makes for a very predictable process. And when it comes to messaging, that's probably the number one feedback we get is, there can be no downtime, and it has to be a seamless cutover. So we're very comfortable with that, and provide a lot of value from both knowing your existing platform and also, knowing how to fit that into the Google environment.
Well, let's talk over a little bit about the cutover there for a second. Now, how do you cope with somebody that, say, has to deal with archived email? I guess one of the benefits is that you can come to a customer who maybe is, say, using some type of anti-spam stuff, and they've been paying for archiving stuff and all that, and work with that through Google, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we probably could have enough another business that goes along recycling things like Barracuda, spam filters, and all the other on-premise equipment.
Now, is that an additional purchase, David? I mean, or because the built-in anti-spam in Gmail seems pretty robust.
It does. The Gmail, the consumer spam filter that you see is actually pretty outstanding in what it does.
Right.
The challenge that you get into is in an enterprise. The Gmail spam filter is largely configured on the back end, and the end user can't do much to modify the behavior of it. So if you wanted to have, a guaranteed whitelist, a guaranteed blacklist, if you needed to do things like legal disclaimers or managing certain policies about message filtering, Google bought Postini probably about 2.5, 3 years ago. And that's really their core strength is the message security. You've probably seen that they've rebranded Postini as GMS or Google Message Security.
Okay.
And it includes that ability to search email for certain keywords. If you need to do mail filtering, the one that we see pretty regular is, I need to make sure that social security numbers and credit card numbers, anything that contains that kind of information is logged or appropriately rerouted to an encryption path.
Okay.
And that's one area. The other is, a lot of folks are coming from a system that had the capability to manage a corporate whitelist and blacklist. Let's say that we routinely send and receive, Frugal TV email, then we would want to have that perhaps as part of our corporate whitelist. And with the consumer spam filter, you're not able to do that,
right.
But with the Google filter, you are.
So it really offers you a lot of granularity when you go that avenue. And I would assume kind of the same thing with the archiving of email as well.
Absolutely. The archiving is really a natural extension of that. It's something that, once you purchase it, it is an add-on service.
Right.
But it's a checkbox, and it will keep, 10 years of all your mail. Wow. And in the past, that's been a big challenge, especially for folks in government who it's not uncommon to see, have a user that all they do all day long is search tapes and do reloads for open records requests. And with Google Apps and especially, the Postini archiving service, you can just give a user a username and password, and they can log in and they can search the entire scope that you give them access to for every email, whether internal, external, or otherwise, for the past 10 years without having to, find a tape and get it recovered from some off-site facility. It's just a checkbox, and it makes life for folks that have any kind of compliance needs like that, so much easier.
I just got there was a post just put in the chat room going, anyone here use Google Apps? I, for one, use Google Apps. Okay.
Absolutely. When we first get engaged with a customer, that's one of the questions we ask.
I actually should say that I keep multiple hands in multiple waters. I'm also have an Exchange environment for one domain, and then I have a Google Apps environment for another. So I kind of have my hands in different pies. And I'm sure some of the others, Corn Dog Computing, Google Apps environment. I know for sure many of his clients are Google Apps environments. We're working with some clients as well about Google Apps. So it's a very, very popular service. The next question I have for you, and I'm sure that some of these things are pretty common, but when you're talking to a prospective new customer, right? Many times, they're probably throwing up some roadblocks or objections that they're kind of afraid. Well, we're kind of reluctant to move with you guys because of A, B, and C. What are some of those things that they're throwing at you, and how do you overcome those?
Excuse me. Good. It's a good question. Excuse me just a second.
Get you a drink of water. That's fine.
It's a a conversation we have on a pretty regular basis. And it usually starts out with a discussion around security. And it's a great discussion to have, because a lot of people, immediately assume that there is inherent risk in having their data hosted in the cloud. And as we talk through the security measures that are in place, especially that Google provides,
Mm-hmm.
we usually find that the security is, tenfold what it would be in an on-premise environment. And a lot of that is
Tenfold.
relatively fundamental of the Google infrastructure. If you look, Google's whole process of protecting their environment has been exposed to the public for many years now, and they have a huge reputation in keeping the Google page up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that doesn't happen by accident. So what they've seen, especially as webmail has become so pervasive,
Mm-hmm.
There's some fundamental things that on-premise systems didn't have to account for.
Mm-hmm.
And we now have to do that in a Google world. And the first thing that most people see in this respect is they have to complete a CAPTCHA the first time they log into Google Apps and they set up their account.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a security measure that you'll ever see, baked into an Outlook client.
Well, that's true.
The reason that it's so critical is, something like a 3 strikes you're out policy is imperative to prevent hacking. You need something that, if there's a brute force attempt to try and guess a password, somebody's recorded a screen script or something like that, just relying on the strength of that password is not effective. You have to have something recognizes that you're trying to, maliciously hack that.
Mm-hmm.
And, after a few bad guesses, you'll see that Google presents a very friendly way, but a very firm way of defending itself through that CAPTCHA. That's something that, even to this day is very, very difficult programmatically to crack.
Okay.
And if you don't complete the CAPTCHA, you're essentially locked out from doing any kind of brute force attack. And that's, just a lesson that Google learned early on and is applied across the product suite. It's, if you're looking at a lot of other webmail systems, they don't have the economy of scale of the lessons that have been learned from a security perspective. So security is definitely something that keeps people and at least somewhat tentative about making the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the other thing that is, in the top 5 list is the change in control. So in the past, people have felt that, being able to run down the hall and kick the server, or, corner the IT guy to get the server back running, that really gave a feeling of empowerment to
Right.
ensuring your messaging system came back online. And I tend to kind of compare this to the difference between, taking a trip in a car and an airplane. When you get on an airplane, you do sacrifice some conveniences and control. You don't just, pull over and stop at the nearest airport,
Right.
like you would in a car.
Right.
But if you objectively look at the situation and the safety of traveling in an airliner versus an automobile, it's at least 1, if not 2 orders of magnitude safer,
Mm-hmm.
per mile traveled to be in an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, as anyone sitting on an airplane and, getting the large menu of choices of peanuts has seen, you definitely have a very, very different feeling of control. But again, you kind of look back at the reliability and what this control provides. The Google environment is very stable, and if there is the slightest hiccup in the Google environment, there's not too much of a need to report it, because it's probably on the front page of just about every tech website out there. So the change in control is probably the second thing
Mm-hmm.
that we see in terms of hesitation moving forward. The last one, and probably the most interesting, is just change in general. You know,
right.
Google Apps is not Microsoft Outlook.
Right.
And that's a change for a lot of people. You know, tech organizations tend to embrace it more quickly, so that's why you'll see a lot of technology companies on apps. But this is a big shift from having that Outlook client, and Google recognizes this. And as part of the Premier Edition of Google Apps, or Google Apps for Business, they've actually built a plugin that allows those people who might have been afraid in the past of getting rid of Outlook to live in Outlook, and the plugin will synchronize the user's Outlook environment directly with Google using, you know, API calls, so that it gives you, you know, very good fidelity in terms of your mail, your calendar, your contacts. All that's kept up to date in real time, and you can always log into the browser and see. We see it predominantly used for that. It's really a transition tool to make someone feel comfortable as they are, you know, starting to leave Outlook to get into the web browser and the Google Apps interface directly.
What, do you find that people are willing to give up Outlook and start using the web product more, or
it's really interesting?
Okay.
You know, we always tell people that it's a transition strategy, and a lot of times a deployment may consist of, you know, 10 to 20% of the users that use the Outlook plugin. We find that within 3 months of a deployment, that percentage usually drops to less than 5%, and that's typically voluntary.
They just quit using Outlook.
Okay. So it's a natural trend. It's not something that, you know, that we're enforcing, but people start to see, you know, this ability to connect without a VPN and without being tied to a specific computer. And, you know, the Google interface, people see it as very different because of the things like conversation threading and the fact that it's browser-based. But relatively quickly, people latch on to that, and at least in a corporate environment, tend to gravitate towards it within that first 3 months.
That's a very interesting statistic you have there. We're getting ready to go on a break here in just a moment, but you see these companies and these with their employees just desperately clinging to Outlook when there's actually better way of doing things than Outlook. I do know that Microsoft's done a bang-up job trying to make things dependent on Outlook in its Office suite, you know, for like things like doing mail merges and, you know, and that kind of thing. But it's just a learning process. Tell you what, folks, we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back with Mr. David Hoff of Cloudsherpas, so don't go away.
Do you worry that your antivirus engine can't block all viruses and malware attacks? Or that the brand you use is not always the quickest in reacting to all new viruses? This graph illustrates the response times of different antivirus companies to two separate threats: the outbreaks of Sober.C and Sober.Y. It is not always the same antivirus vendor that is the first to detect a new virus and the fastest to issue protection against the latest attack. And no single antivirus engine can always be the best in combating every area of malware. So relying on only one antivirus engine simply cannot provide you with the level of security you need to ward off all email threats. The answer? Block all viruses at server level with GFI Mail Security, the #1 email security solution for small and medium-sized businesses. GFI Mail Security performs virus checking using up to 5 virus scanning engines to guarantee a higher detection rate and the fastest possible response to new viruses. The Norman Virus Control and Bitdefender engines are included as standard. Kaspersky, McAfee, and AVG antivirus are optional. Using multiple antivirus engines maximizes on the strengths of each antivirus engine and ensures the fastest lead time from virus to signature, as you receive updates from the quickest company to react to a virus every time. To protect against all forms of email-based malware, GFI Mail Security augments the security it provides by also including several other layers of security. Its unique Trojan and executable scanner detects malicious executables without the need for virus updates. Its GFI email exploit engine safeguards users against future email viruses and attacks. Its HTML sanitizer disables HTML scripts. GFI Mail Security additionally permits email content and attachment checking policies both at user level and on a group basis. GFI Mail Security is Checkmark and ICSA certified and has won numerous awards and accolades. And it is used by over 30,000 organizations worldwide. Join them today and beef up your email security at server level in a highly cost-effective manner. GFI Mail Security, the leading server-based email security solution for Exchange, SMTP servers, and Lotus Notes. Try a full version for free and without obligations.
And we're back. I want to remind everybody, if you're watching on Justin.tv, come over to live.frugalbrothers.com. That is where the embedded chat room is, and just a beautiful player that we have for our program. We're here today with guest David Hoff of Cloudsherpas. They are a leading company in moving businesses and government to the cloud with Google Apps. And let's get David back on the program. Hey, David.
Good afternoon.
Okay. We kind of left off before the break talking about reasons why organizations might be reluctant to move to Google Apps. Obviously, there's a whole lots of benefits, but just for those who may not be familiar, can you just kind of quickly give us some of the major benefits of moving your organization to a Google Apps environment?
Yeah, absolutely. The top three benefits that we usually see, and the reason why people are kind of evaluating their messaging and sometimes collaboration strategies. Mm-hmm. The number one is almost always cost.
Sure.
When you look at the numbers that are out there, whether it's from an analyst, we always enjoy to hear what a customer says, and sometimes the analysts undercut things a bit. But the numbers range per user anywhere from about $300 to $600 per person per year to deliver a full email experience between the hardware, the software, the support, the infrastructure. And, from a cost perspective, worst case, even if we have 10 years worth of archiving, the Google equivalent is roughly $80, $85, including your administrative costs. So just, kind of looking at that is probably the top reason that people start evaluating or reevaluating what they're doing. The second two reasons tend to be tied, but they largely center around access and reliability. Mm-hmm. And, given that Google is a browser-based solution, a lot of folks are having to go through, the IWA access from Exchange or connecting to a VPN and using an Outlook. Mm-hmm. And, Google provides this same level of SSL encryption, but it just does it natively, via your browser. So the same, kind of encryption you have dealing with your banking site, you get with Google. You just don't need any of that VPN infrastructure to do it. The last thing is, around reliability. And a lot of organizations during these times have struggled to provide, full clustering and redundant disaster recovery. Mm-hmm. The cost to implement a secondary data center can be quite prohibitive for many organizations. So, right. When something goes wrong, and a lot of times the things that go wrong are, human error. Exchange, especially the 07 and 2010 versions, are not trivial products anymore. They have a good deal of complexity. Yes. And, it's not uncommon to hear about an outage, and a lot of time an outage affects, the whole organization. So knowing that, that's kind of a commodity service, and that Google's reliability is committed in writing at 3 nines, but typically, provides 4 nines worth of uptime. Most organizations will use that cost, that access, and the reliability as their key criteria for moving to Google Apps.
So basically, reliability, cost, and security would be 3 of the major benefits right there. And, obviously, you can reassign or use your people managing an Exchange environment for other purposes in your organization. And that also has a manpower savings as well.
Absolutely. It's interesting when we work with companies, especially, ones that we migrated to, plus years ago. Sometimes there's a concern that, oh my gosh, we're going to lay off the IT department. And
right.
we don't typically see that. So something we do see is that IT departments that are extremely thin and after a migration to apps are able to, kind of view email and collaboration as a utility service. So it's kind of like, yeah, the lights are on. If the power goes out, we know what to do, but we no longer have to spend day-to-day time, backing up, archiving, upgrading, managing all this stuff. So the IT department's freed up to do some other more useful stuff, depending on the business. But we don't tend to see that IT need going away. It's usually just shifted to more valuable endeavors.
So can you, and I know this is a very complex thing I'm going to ask of you, but could you give us the mile-high view of what, from a technical perspective, what happens in a migration to Google Apps for a company that's using an Exchange or another email system?
Yeah, absolutely. And my thought is maybe I can just step you through what a traditional migration process would look like. And if we get too down in the weeds, let me know, and I'll certainly bring it back up.
Okay.
But, again, the goal here of migration is to make sure that not a single piece of mail is lost and the users have access to all their information.
Okay.
Kind of the first step in a migration is to, evaluate kind of the return on investment for migrating data. So do we need to take all of our data with us? And if so, what types of data? Is it all of our email data? Is it mail? Is it calendars? Is it contacts? Google provides some free tools for migrating from just about every standard platform, whether it's Lotus Notes or GroupWise or, Microsoft Exchange, to Google Apps. It's really just a matter of how much data do you have, and is it worthwhile to go ahead and migrate it? Some organizations are very focused on cost, and it may make sense just to keep that data live. You don't have to take Outlook away. You can leave it there, and people can refer back to their PSTs as needed. But it may not make financial sense to migrate all that, or that may be a requirement. So that's kind of the first thing, is to build the plan of what's going to get carried forward. The next thing we look at is, typically an early deployment where we do what's called dual delivery. And this is a configuration that you do on your local, either on-premise or hosted server, that allows a subset of your users to live in Google Apps while everyone else can continue to exist in the Exchange server or the Domino server, whatever it is you're using. And everyone gets to keep their email address. And it's essentially a process of just forwarding the mail for these specific users to a background domain that's hosted in Google Apps. And there's a great site, deployment.google.com, that goes through how to configure this environment, screenshot by screenshot with Exchange. This is kind of the early adopter or the pilot phase, where people are living in Google and, identifying any other areas that might need some change management or some education within the organization.
Okay.
But during this time, we haven't materially moved where the mail flows. It all still flows to your on-premise server.
Okay.
once we've kind of got sign off from that early group, a lot of times, it's like the IT group or similar, then we're ready to schedule the cutover. And the challenge that we're dealing with is really one that's imposed by the internet, and that is we can only point mail to one place. We can only point it to Google or to Exchange. Mm-hmm. We can't say, Bob's mail should go here and Steve's mail should go there. Mm-hmm. So dual delivery gets us around that temporarily, and once we've, got the buy-in to shift things over, we'll typically schedule to have an MX cutover or a mail cutover. This is something that's done in DNS, and mm-hmm. we typically schedule that for some kind of low usage time. Mm-hmm. Typically, the most common scenario is Friday at 5. We'll go ahead and cut the MX records from the existing server over to Google or Postini, and it takes typically about 12 to 24 hours for that to fully propagate out to the rest of the internet. So during that time, there's the potential for some mail to get delivered to Exchange and some to Google. After that 24 hours, it's pretty much set that all your mail should be pointed to Google. And so that kind of triggers on our part the migration. So typically, if we kick it over on a Friday at 5, Saturday morning, we'll look and see if any mail is still flowing in and start migrating all the data. So all day Saturday, we'll work on converting the PSTs and pushing, anything that had been kind of determined to get migrated. We'll push that over and feel confident that at that point, nothing new is flowing into Exchange.
Now, just to stop for a second, and you're doing this remotely?
Typically, we do almost all of the work remotely,
okay.
Depending on the environment.
All right.
We'll, have some kickoff meetings or some in-person education, but most of the work can be done remotely, since it's all network-based.
Okay.
We'll do that over the weekend. We'll come in on Sunday and do some spot checking to verify message counts and migrations, that everything's been successful.
Okay.
And when the users come in on Monday, everyone is, accessing mail.mydomain.com via Google Apps, and they're all transitioned over. There's definitely some advanced planning that goes into this, but that's, at least from a high level, how we do most of the migrations.
Okay. And then when we're talking a lot about the mail component of Google Apps, there's certainly a lot more to it. How do you handle, do you also create Google Sites for people, or how do you handle or work with them as far as maybe moving their documents, sharing documents, creating an intranet using Google Sites? Do you do that kind of work as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Viewers are welcome to check out our website or poke around in the Google Apps marketplace. We have a lot of customers that want to move, a file server or some kind of local repository of files to Google Apps. We have a product called BFU, the bulk file uploader.
Okay.
Built for just that situation. So, you've got 10,000 documents that you need to move from your file server in the office up to Google Apps. We can do that, whether it's into to Google Docs or Google Sites is kind of up to you. There's different reasons you might want to use one versus the other.
Okay.
And we've got a methodology that'll, step you through some questions. Do we need to have lots of multi-user access, or is this mostly end-user data that end users are going to access?
Right.
It just helps pick which is the right tool to migrate that data. The other thing we see a lot of organizations do as a first project once they've been on apps for a while is a lot of them will migrate their corporate intranet to Google Sites. Mm-hmm. They'll start to embrace that collaboration. Mm-hmm. And most of the products like Sites and Docs are launched as what we would call soft launches. The messaging is, on this date we're cutting over. We're going to turn on these other services like Sites and Docs and videos, but they won't be formally migrated over to, for some time period after the mail cutover.
Okay.
The natural, adoption curve, because, when you get a file in your inbox, or you're accessing the navigation bar in Google Apps. Mm-hmm. It's so tightly integrated that you find a lot of people just organically start using it.
Right.
But a lot of times there will be a harder launch where the corporate intranet is built out, and we've done a lot of large-scale intranet deployments where lots and lots of documents are moved over. There's going to be some workflow processes, maybe some employee onboarding workflows, vacation requests, time off requests. These things are all very easy to do now in things like Google Spreadsheets. So, in places where you may not have had an application that could be shared easily by the whole company, mm-hmm. Or you had one that wasn't as easy to use on the web, we'll do a lot of development in AppScript or App Engine to build those processes right into the Google framework.
So you can use Google Apps Engine to develop applications for Google on the web. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's
very cool. And now, not having worked with Google Apps Engine myself, what is that? Is it a language? Is it an IDE? What is it exactly?
It's a good question. We kind of divide the cloud into 3 layers.
Okay.
Everything that we've been talking about with Google Apps is what I would call the top layer. It's all software as a service,
right.
Something that an end user can directly consume.
Right.
The second layer is typically platform as a service. So it's a development environment that you can have a coder or developer in your organization stick code into, and all of the infrastructure is taken care of for you. So load balancers, scaling, database clustering, all that is typically built into what we would call a platform as a service.
Okay.
Google App Engine is a great example of that. Microsoft has their Azure platform. Salesforce has Force.com. There's other competitors like EngineYard. But Google's platform as a service is a very open and standards-based implementation, and it's centered around primarily 2 languages, Java and Python. So the code that you would write, can be done, if you're a developer, in an Eclipse client, as mm-hmm. most people would be commonly using for an IDE or whatever IDE you would want to use. As long as it can compile to Java bytecode, we can deploy it to the Google App Engine. And, a great example of this, we have a tool called Sherpa tools, mm-hmm. and we don't have a large infrastructure staff, mostly just developers, and they deploy to App Engine, and we've probably got a few million users running Sherpa tools, and none of the headaches of managing that infrastructure. And the Google App Engine is done on the same platform, the same infrastructure as Google, so the cost to actually deploy something like this is amazingly inexpensive. You get a free quota for an app that equates to roughly 5 million page views a month. And then it's a few cents over that. If you want to enable billing, you can turn that on to consume even more resources. But very, very, very cost effective. And, if you come from the Python world or the Java world, there's some new concepts to learn, anytime you jump into a platform as a service. Mm-hmm. But Google's very open and transparent in terms of providing that support for you.
That is outstanding. So, I guess you've kind of addressed some of this earlier, but, once you're done migrating a company to Google Apps, right? Mm-hmm. You've got the migration done and all that kind of thing. What kind of add-on products and services do you offer that makes, Google Apps sizzle, or what add-ons or value adds that you have other than Sherpa tools?
That's a good question. Our product set is not, I would say, all-encompassing in terms of end-user tools at this point, and I would most commonly point people to the Google Apps Marketplace. It's a great place, with a click or two, you can have a fully functional application deployed We use a lot of various products that come through the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
But Sherpa tools, the bulk file uploader, and our custom development services are the main ones that we work with customers post-deployment on.
Okay. All right. So, there's still people out there that's concerned about their data being stored in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How do you alleviate their concerns? What statements or what can you say, look, this is why you don't need to worry?
Well, so the first thing is I think it's great that they are concerned, and I think more people need to ask those kind of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because the security should not ever be taken for granted, and it should never be something based on, just one feature or function. So when we start to look at, what is needed for cloud security,
mm-hmm.
There's a couple things that you want to look at. There's past track record, there's specific security controls, and there's the number of layers that are placed upon those controls. Google was the first, and I believe still the only large-scale messaging environment that has received the government stamp of approval. So if you look, Google achieved their FISMAT certification probably about 3 or 4 months ago. And this was in response to several large government organizations going out and investigating Google Apps as a replacement. And that FISMAT certification really speaks to some of the underlying security process that's in place.
Okay.
The other common one that you'll hear, and it really should just be an automatic for anyone under consideration, but it's the SAS 70 Type 2 certification. Type 2 is specifically for services like Google Apps. And it's an independent third-party certification that confirms the vendor is committing to and following through with the controls that they say are in place. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that is a one-time thing. So when Google says, that they have biometric security at all their data centers, that they use, man traps for access and control of who comes in and out, the SAS 70 certification audits and validates that, and that's available. The entire Google Apps Suite is SAS 70 certified. The other thing to keep in mind is Google didn't come from an on-premise environment that was, modified to fit multi-tenant. They have believed in large-scale computing from the very beginning. And when you look at how their infrastructure is built, it's got its own proprietary file system. A lot of the roots come from the Linux operating system, mm-hmm. but it uses a sharded file system on the back end. And this infrastructure that everything is deployed on is shared across the entire Google space. And when you think about what else exists, mm-hmm. This is Larry and Sergey's email at Google. They're not on special servers. They're on the same servers that you and I as Google Apps users are using. And that allows Google to have consistent security across the entire platform. You can also look at the fact that Google Checkout, something that requires one of the highest levels of security certification, the PCI certification.
Right.
Google has millions of dollars a minute flowing through Google Checkout. And again, it's the same operating system, the same platform across the entire Google stack. And the same security technologies are applied to all of these things. So those are usually some of the first things that we start to talk about with customers, especially when we compare what does a customer have on premise. Mm-hmm. Google is probably the fourth largest hardware manufacturer in the server space, and the only consumer of that equipment is them. So that
they build all their own servers, huh?
Yeah, they absolutely do. They are purpose-built for Google. So there is not, any kind of exposure or any kind of security footprint that is unintended.
Wow, that's amazing.
And with,
okay,
even on this scale, they can patch the entire infrastructure in 24 hours because of this automated approach. And when you think about your on-premise environment, a lot of folks are still running, Exchange 03 that definitely was written for a different time and a different type of security threats.
Mm-hmm.
Google's infrastructure is updated daily to deal with all sorts of security challenges. So the relevancy of their security controls tends to be a lot more than what you would have in an on-premise environment.
As we're drawing to a close, I just got a couple more questions for you, David. Can you tell me why you started Cloudsherpas?
Absolutely. We really saw email and collaboration technologies becoming a lot like the utility infrastructure. So I kind of mentioned to make sure the lights were on.
Mm-hmm.
Email is not something that is a competitive advantage. It's not something that if our email is better than yours, we're somehow a more valuable business. And it really needs to be commoditized as such. So, having just a common price point that is very, very low, having an excellent security infrastructure, all of these things are, kind of definitions of a commodity. And we really saw a lot of organizations starting to move that way.
Mm-hmm.
We're very passionate about enterprises and how they could embrace some of these benefits of consumer technology, and focused our business model around Google and Google Apps specifically. But a lot of it was around that transformation process, and that's kind of where the name came from. Cloudsherpas is really meant to be guides to help companies moving from their legacy infrastructures to cloud-based platforms like Google.
So what's the next big thing for you guys?
Right now, a lot of it is probably headed in two directions. We're definitely embracing more aggressively the micro SMB, or the very small end of the market,
mm-hmm.
To help build services that are easily repeatable. If you have less than 20 users. The other thing that we see lots of adoption is around some of the more sophisticated collaboration projects. One of the common trends we see is organizations getting away from the Microsoft environment, specifically SharePoint, and moving all of that to Google Sites. And there's a lot of migration, a lot of adoption that needs to occur in that space, and we've been working a lot on those large-scale collaboration migrations.
All right. Finally, David, last question of the day. A lot of us are business people ourselves. We're entrepreneurs, that kind of thing. We always love to pick the brains of somebody running a successful company. If you can could give just one piece of business advice to offer an aspiring entrepreneur or somebody that's already managing their business, what would that piece of advice be?
That's a good question. My answer is probably not the most compelling, but really determination and persistence are the things that have helped us through. There has to be a strong commitment to what you're doing and a strong passion for it to continue. But really that determination and persistence is important. When we first started to establish our partnership with Google, it definitely took many attempts to build that partnership, and that determination has really been what's carried us through and made us successful.
That is some excellent advice. So many people, I think, give up on the cusp of success. And, reminds me of the old joke, the guy that started 1 up and quit, 2 up and quit, 3 up and quit, and finally the guy that started 7 up, and look how he did. At any rate, we had Mr. David Hoff. He is the co-founder and vice president of Cloudsherpas on today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us here at Frugal Tech Live.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And we enjoyed it, and you're welcome back as a guest anytime you wish. So we want you to have a great day. If you don't mind sticking around for just a minute, maybe we can take some Q&A after the show.
I'll be here.
Okay, great. We want to thank everybody for stopping by today's episode of Frugal Tech Live. We want to remind you, if you're watching us on Justin TV, the best place and the best experience to watch our program is at live.frugalbrothers.com. We also ask that you click that follow button. You can also follow Cloudsherpas on Twitter at Cloudsherpas. It's at Cloudsherpas on Twitter as well. From Cindy and I here, the Queen, we want to remind you, if it's in your shop, not making you money or saving you money, get it out of there. We'll see you Sunday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much.